Again, if you would open a Bible to Genesis chapter 29, we're going to continue what we started last week, and we're going to look at Jacob's life, and specifically with this idea, God made Jacob for more than Jacob realized. God made you for more than you realize as well. And the big question is, how do we get there? How do we get to where God wants us to be so we can become the person God created and designed us to be? That's the whole idea behind this message today. Last week I shared with you this idea, or not this idea rather, I shared with you a little bit of Rhonda and I's story. I was pastoring at North Park Baptist Church in Orlando, Florida, and we were there. We led them through a transition to move from where they were to a brand new community. And in the midst of that, God began to stir our hearts to do something different. And that something different was not to go to another established church, but to plant a brand new church. And so we left all, and we came up here, back home. And when I say left, we didn't even know where we were going to plant said church. And we literally, while the moving van was there, we're loading everything on it, and the driver asked, "Where am I taking it?" We didn't have a house to live at that point. We had an idea, but I said, "Hang on just a minute. I'll let you know in an hour." And he said, "Sir, I've got to go. I've got to take it somewhere." Well, within that hour, God said, He opened the door. We had a house. I gave him the address, and we rented a house sight unseen. We just took it. It was an amazing journey. And as the journey unfolded, the thing that struck both of us was, as we were praying about it, and Rhonda was the one that coined it. I couldn't coin it. Failure is not an option. I shared that with you last week. Now, what I want you to hear me say right now is this. What you may say, what I may say, or even what Rhonda may say, it doesn't matter. Just put your name there. When we say things like, failure is not an option, or something like that, God may just let it fail. God may let you trip and fall flat on your face, because that's exactly what happened to Jacob. Jacob is about to experience something he could have never planned, never dreamed of, or never even wanted. Because what God needed to do in Jacob's life was change a heart and a mind from being so prideful and self-confident in himself rather than trusting God. That's where a lot of us are sometimes. We have this idea, I can do it, or I will make it happen. And God may say, well, you probably have the gifts or the ability. God may say, you're not always trusting me in the venture. And so God may let us fall flat on our face in order to bring us to where He wants us to be. Now, with that said, Jacob spent, get this, 20 years of his life learning humility. 20 years. I read that, that's a long time. I don't really want to go through a moment where God says to me, it's going to take you 20 years to learn the lesson that I wanted you to learn a long time ago. None of us likes that, but sometimes we've got to go through it. So, in this story, and we're going to just dive in pretty quick today, the message is titled, The Price is Right. Some of you may be thinking, that's a TV show. It is a TV show. This has nothing to do with naming the price of an item in a TV show. This has to do, and it comes from the story itself. Jacob's going to pay a price, not just with time, but he's going to pay a price in relationship with a woman. We'll get to that in just a moment. So, in the story, his daddy has told him, son, because of what you've done in upsetting your brother Esau by one, encouraging him to sell his birthright to you for food, and then by deceiving me to steal his blessing, and now he's saying he's going to kill you, you got to go. And where you need to go is back to the land of my dad, Abraham, which is the land of Ur. So he's telling Jacob, you got to leave here, go back to your grandfather's homeland. It's a long journey, and there you will find your mother's brother, Laban. I want you to pick a wife from him. Yes, he was going to marry a cousin. I'm going to leave it at that. It was cultural at the time. To my knowledge, nobody in the room today has married his or her cousin. All right, now we've got that out of the way. So he goes on this very long journey, and it was a long journey. He finally made his way to this area called Padan Aram. And while he was there were some shepherds sitting down near a watering hole. Jacob thought he was where he needed to be, so he asked them, am I where I need to be? And is this the land of? And yes, it is. And then he asked, do any of you know a guy named Laban? And they all said, yeah, we know Laban. He lives just down the road. In fact, there comes his daughter now. It happened to be Rachel. Rachel was the younger of two daughters. And Rachel herself was a shepherd. And she was leading some flock. Well, Jacob rushed in and he moved the stone from the top of the well so she could feed her sheep. And then he came and they'd never met until this day. He came in, he said, oh, you're Rachel, you're my cousin, my mother's brothers, and he went through all of that. And the Bible says he kissed her. It was common in the Middle East to kiss on the cheek. It wasn't no lip kiss, all right? So y'all don't go crazy on me. He kissed her on the cheek, and it was a traditional greeting. And when he saw her, this is his thought: you are a beautiful woman. And he began to develop this love for her. And she ran back and told Daddy, and then Daddy and Jacob meet. And then as they conversed and they talked, this is where I want us to take up the story and read just a little bit. Genesis 29, beginning in verse 14. Laban said to him, Laban said to him, yes, you are my own flesh and blood. After Jacob had stayed with him a month, Laban said to Jacob, just because you're my relative, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. All right, here's where we're getting into the price is right kind of thing. Tell me what your wages should be. Now, Laban had two daughters. The older was named Leah, and the younger was named Rachel. Verse 17 is comical, at least to me it's comical. Nobody really knows what this means. I'm going to read it, and then we'll talk a moment. Leah had ordinary eyes. I don't know what that means. I don't know maybe they didn't have a sparkle. Maybe she had a lazy eye. Maybe there was a cross eye. I don't know what was wrong with Rachel's eyes, but when Jacob looked at Leah, it was kind of like, yeah, you're just there. You're just there. But, verse 17 says, Leah had ordinary eyes, but Rachel was shapely and beautiful. I'm just reading the scripture, y'all. Here's Jacob. He looks at Leah and he's like, yeah, you're kind of normal. Nothing stands out but your eyes. It's like, I don't want to look at your face. But then he looked over at Rachel and he's like, wow, love of who? He just had it going on there in his brain. She's a beautiful woman. Verse 18, Jacob loved Rachel. So he answered Laban, I'll work for you, get this, 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. In other words, I will work for you for 7 years without pay. Food and shelter. But at the end of the 7 years, you're going to let me marry Rachel. 7 years. Let that sink in. Men, how many of us have ever looked at another woman and said, I worked 7 years to marry you? Okay, we'll move on. Laban replied in verse 19, better that I give her to you than some other man. Stay with me. Here's Laban. What a deal. I've got me a man to work the flocks for 7 years, and all I got to do is feed him and give him a place to live. Then I'll give him my daughter. Now, we may think this strange and odd, but back in this day, at that time, women, you didn't get to choose who you wanted to marry. Your daddy chose the man you would marry. You were in essence property. Sorry, that's just the way it was. Not saying it's right, that's just the way it was. Now, love may have had some things to do with it, but very little. So, verse 20, Jacob worked 7 years for Rachel, and they seem, this is like, aw, they seem like only a few days to him because of his love for her. I know it, isn't that so sappy? Jeez. I mean, he loves her to death, and he's going to work hard for 7 years. And he did. He worked 7 years, and when the 7th year came to an end, you can read the rest of the story later, Jacob went to Laban and said, I have fulfilled my responsibility. It's time for you to give me Rachel. And Laban said, all right then, we'll make it happen. And the date was set, and they were going to have this big wedding party, and they had the party. And they had the ceremony. And then it came time for you know what? For the consummation. And then Jacob was told to go to the tent or the house, and he went there. And Laban said, I will send Rachel over to you. It's dark. There are no lights. Who knows what Laban told the daughter? But he didn't send Rachel. He sent Leah. The one that had the eye problem. She goes in. They lay down. They do what you do on your wedding night. The next morning when they woke up and daylight hit, it was like, whoa. You're not Rachel. You're Leah. How would you, I mean, that would be a bad morning, right? You just worked 7 years for the beautiful figurine woman, and you got the one with the bad eye. He gets up, he goes and finds Laban, and he says, Laban, excuse me, you gave me the wrong one. And Laban said, well, look, we've got a custom. You don't marry off the younger one ahead of the older one. Should have probably told you that, but I didn't because I knew you wouldn't go for it. But you worked 7 years. You got her. You're going to stay married to her. But I'll still give you Rachel, but you got to work for me for 7 more years. And Jacob's like, well, I don't like this at all. I wanted Rachel. Well, you got her. And the marriage is already consummated, so we can't undo it. He said, but I tell you what. After the week of ceremony's over, so they had a wedding celebration for a whole week. After the week is over, I'll give you Rachel too. But you still got to work 7 years. Double trouble. You know, the price was right, but the price was so wrong. You know, we're not, I mean, for us in modern day America, it sounds very strange and odd, doesn't it? He's got now 2 wives. By the end of the chapter, he's got 2 wives, and sadly, Jacob hasn't learned a lot. He loves Rachel more than he'll ever love Leah. He just did. And as the 3 of them are now husband and wives, I guess would be the right word, Rachel can't conceive because God has closed her womb for this reason. God closed Rachel's womb because God noticed and observed that Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. Leah was neglected, but God loved Leah as well, and she's having babies left and right. And sons specifically. And now Rachel's getting upset and jealous of her sister because, well, I'm just going to die if I can't have a baby because you're going to love her more than you love me, and I need a baby. I mean, do you see the Jerry Springer drama just coming out here? So it's all coming out, and now Rachel's got these 2 wives and some sons, and they both have their slaves, and now they got babies from the slaves. It is a nightmare. It's a nightmare. And Jacob's having to work 7 more years. And now, after 14 years of working for one woman, getting the wrong woman, then getting the woman he wanted, but having both women, and now having babies and not having babies, and having all of that. He has this to show for his name financially. Nothing. He ain't got nothing. And all of this because he, Jacob, one day said to his older brother, by just a moment or two, because remember they were twins, his older brother was hungry, and he said, if you'll sell me your birthright, then I'll give you some stew. And his older brother sold. Jacob played on his brother's emotional, hungry state. And then later, with his mama, Rebekah, they concocted a plan to get the blessing, which was the most important thing in a Jewish man's life. And he stole the blessing from his brother. So Jacob himself was, guess what? A deceiver. And now the deceiver just got deceived. Isn't that interesting? Jacob deceived to get what he wanted, financial gain, and now he himself has been deceived again, himself. Now, here's what I want you to see. When you become like Jacob, or when I become like Jacob, and when I think I know best, Jacob had a lot of skills, by the way. He was an excellent herdsman. He knew how to farm. He knew how to do that. And he knew how to take care of sheep and goats. Jacob's biggest problem was himself. He thought he knew best. In other words, his idea was, I can do it because I'm good. Well, now he's in a hot mess because of all that he's done. So here's what I want you to think about for just a moment. When you find yourself struggling with life, what do? You see, for me and Rhonda, as we've looked back more than once on our life story, and I talked about last week the idea that you and I need to have a heart change. And our heart change is ongoing. It's not I got saved and I gave my life to Jesus and now I'm good. Heart change is a constant struggle for believers because we need to constantly be saying, God, change my heart, change my mind, help me think like you think, help me crave the things that you want rather than the things that I want. God, change me so that I am always in line with your perfect will. But here's the problem. Most of us have a heart change and then a little heart change, but somewhere along the way we may forget about constantly needing a changed heart. Because sometimes we get the point or the idea, I can do it, I can handle it, I can take care of it. I'm in charge. I'm an adult. I can make my own decisions. I know what to do. I've been to school, or I've been to training, or I've done this, or I've done. And so we have to remember the journey of faith is constantly struggling with becoming the person God wants us to become. And so we have to have a constant heart change, and we remember those markers in our life. So here's me and Rhonda. We're going through our life. I had been pastoring for a few years, by the way. I'd pastored High Shoals Baptist Church in Dallas, Georgia for 2 years. And then I went from there to Cartersville, where I pastored for some 7 years, Friendship Baptist Church. It was there that I got my master's degree and my doctor of ministry degree. Ooh, look at me, I'm a doctor now. That's what I was thinking. I got my doctorate. I'm going to be a big man. I'm going to make me a big church. Seriously, that's what I was thinking. And I remember the doors opened. I was being interviewed by First Baptist of this church and First Baptist of this town or this other church. It was like we could have chosen almost where we wanted to go. Me and Rhonda were, and then the call came from Orlando, Florida. And Rhonda and I were like, oh, we can go to live where Disney's at. She didn't say it like that. I'm looking at her. I'll be in trouble later. Thank God I've only got one wife. That was a joke, y'all. Rhonda, that was a joke. You know that, don't you? Okay. So when you think about that, I am looking at my life and I'm going, I have got these degrees and this training and I know what I'm doing, and the door opened, and God, we went to Orlando, Florida. We stayed there 11 years. And in the midst of that, we felt God leading us out of an established church to starting one from scratch. It was an exciting journey, and the journey of faith was beginning. And I remember moving to this rental house in Dallas, Georgia, and we were praying, where would God have us to start the church? We eventually settled on Douglas County, and we went there, and things were looking up pretty good. And then the recession hit, and the long story short, after 3 years, we had to shut it down. And I remember Dan Dockery, the associational missionary here in our area, some of the pastors here in Carrollton calling me saying, you're closing? Yep. How many do you have every week? And I said, well, maybe 35 to 40. And they were all like, well, that's as many as we have, and we're not shutting down. And I said, I don't have money. I got to eat. And for me at that point, being bivocational, which means go get a real job, not a dream church job, but go get a real job, was not really in my brain. Those were difficult days for me and Rhonda. We fought, we argued. I blamed her, she blamed me. The tension was great. Money got more than tight. When I say money got more than tight, there was a moment where we had creditors calling us wanting money. And I remember telling them, look, here's the way it works. We're going to eat, pay our mortgage, pay the electric bill, and try to put food or gas in the car. I mean, I said, you're at the bottom of the list. You're not getting money until I get some money, because I don't have any money. That's how bad our finances were. And through that darkness, hospice opened. Now, here's the honest truth. When hospice opened, I said, I need a job. Hospice chaplain, I'll do that. I can do that. And about 3 months into that job, one of the bigger wigs in the company sat down with me and said, well, how do you like working in hospice? And I said, oh, I like it. And then she asked this question, have you been called to do hospice? I thought, I needed a job. I mean, it pays the bills. Called? I'll have to pray about that. So I convinced myself for a while I was called to do hospice. Here's what I'm trying to say to you. When we go through moments of life and make decisions and life happens, we may be a little more like Jacob than we realize. And maybe that's one of the reasons I love the story of Jacob, because me and Jacob, we're kind of like two peas in the pod, with the exception of only have one wife and he had two. See, here's what I'm saying. We all go through life, pastors, non-pastors. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're on the journey of faith and you think, I've got it together, and yet you wonder why life is not what it could be or should be, and you struggle. Maybe you're a little like Jacob, and you've been trying to do it in your power, in your strength, with your knowledge and your abilities, rather than saying, God, what do you want me to do? And how do you want me to do it? Maybe we should learn to ask ourselves this question, God, what is it you want me to learn? Now, I had to ask that question. I had to ask, God, what is it you want me to learn? While I was serving in hospice and going to Crossroads Church in Douglasville, I had an opportunity to preach at First Baptist Church of Villa Rica. And I went there, and I preached on that particular Sunday. Someone from our small group at Crossroads came to hear me preach. Rhonda was there. She called me the next day, and this is what she said to me. Sam, you have a gift, and you're not using it. And I said, what are you talking about? She said, that was a really good sermon. You're wasting yourself. And I remember saying to her, you don't understand, Deb, I blew it. I messed up my life because of, she said, that doesn't matter. You and God need to get down and have some talks. And so as I talked, you all know the rest of the story. Brenda and company came after me like a little puppy. I mean, y'all just like, let's talk to Sam. Most of you also know I wasn't looking to pastor because I did not feel God would ever want me to do that again. Now, with that said, what I'm trying again to say to you is, in our life, we need to reflect and we need to learn humility. We need to learn to be subdued, broken. Now, I had to get broken, and it wasn't pleasant. So life lessons always have a price. Jacob deceived, and then Jacob himself was deceived. Let's think about it this way. When we sow seeds, we're always going to reap some seeds that we've sown. Good or bad. We always reap what we sow. It's in the New Testament, the book of Galatians, that if we sow good seeds, we'll reap good. If we sow bad seeds, we're going to reap that as well. But what most of us don't think about is when we sow a seed, it takes a while for that seed to germinate, grow, and produce the seeds that it was going to produce. It took me a while to reap my own prideful seeds. It took me a while. And the same is true for you too. Whatever seed you've sown, it'll take a while. And then here's the other thing about reaping what you sow. You always reap more than what you sowed. That is just not fair, is it? It's certainly not fun. I mean, in our minds, we want to say, I just did a little thing. Why is all this happening? Well, because a seed produces a lot of seeds. That's just the way it works. This is exactly what Jacob's experiencing. See, Jacob, when he sat down with Laban and said, I'll work for you for 7 years, he thought that was the right price to find a wife. He was wrong. He was very wrong. He didn't know he was going to get tricked. He didn't know that his past would catch up to him at this point. And the reason his past caught up with him is because Jacob needed to learn humility. Jacob needed to learn to trust God rather than in what he could do. And it cost him 20 years, not 7. Now, for you and me, we've got to learn that in the midst of all of that, whatever phase you're in, God's grace is always present while you're reaping what you've sown. Grace. Now, this is what that means. God never turned his back on Jacob. God never said, Jacob, you're on your own, you deceiving, self-centered, egotistical man. Jacob had to still pay the price. Every man in this room and every woman knows marriage is great, amazing, and challenging. Now, I am glad we live in a culture where it's one man and one woman. I'm glad for that, because I can't imagine if I had 2 wives. No. I don't want 2 wives. I don't need 2 wives. All I need is one woman. That's not the point. The point is this. When Jacob made the deal, he got more than he bargained for, because Jacob needed to learn some hard lessons. Imagine Jacob for 7 years after he got Leah and Rachel, listening to them. Well, Jacob doesn't show me any attention. Jacob shows you more attention. Jacob loves you more than he loves me. Well, I can't have any babies because God's closed my womb because of you. Jacob, what are you going to do about this? Jacob, are you going to do anything about it? Jacob, how long are we going to stay here with Daddy? You know, he's not letting you have anything. He owns everything. You don't own a single thing. When are you going to take care of us? Day in, day out. Day in, day out. For 7 years. Jacob comes home. Who are you going to sleep with tonight, Jacob? Jacob, you going to go to her room tonight? You going to come to my room tonight? What are you going to do, Jacob? Jacob, I cooked this for you. Jacob, I cooked this for you. It's like, geez. I mean, he just probably wanted to go to the fields and tend the sheep. Not even come home. And God is saying to Jacob, Jacob, listen to me, Jacob. You need to subdue your life to me. Don't worry about this mess. I'll give you grace during the mess, but you've got to learn to be a humble man. You can't worry about brother Esau who wants to kill you. See, Jacob had a lot of problems. Can't go home because Esau said he'll kill him. Daddy may or may not be alive anymore. Rachel his mama may not be alive either. He doesn't know what's going on. He just knows he's got crazy Uncle Laban and 2 crazy women, one beautiful and one with an eye problem. And Jacob just thinks, I don't own anything. My life is a mess. What have I done? He had to learn to say, God, I'm going to submit to you. And I'm going to trust you with this mess. Because that's what he had. And that's the lesson for me and you. We've got to say, God, I made a mess. And now I'm stepping in it. I can't clean it up because I don't know how to clean it up. I'm going to let you clean it up. And I'm going to trust you. And God said, okay, I'll clean it up, but it's going to take it's going to take 12 more years. And Jacob said, oh, okay. If that's what it's going to take, I'll learn to cope. And that's where most of us struggle and fail. When we find ourselves in a mess because of something we may or may not have done back here, we say, God, deliver me from the mess right now. And God says, no. Lessons aren't learned when the mess is cleaned up quickly. We got to learn to go through the pain and trust in order to grow and change. Not fun, is it? Nope. You may say, well, you're a preacher. Yeah, big deal. I don't even tell people I'm Dr. Braswell. Do you know why? It's just a piece of paper that says I went to school and I did a lot of hard work and fooled a lot of people that I was smart. I passed the tests and I passed the questions. It doesn't make me smart. It just means I went through some hoops. That's all it really means. Because the lessons that I have learned that had nothing to do with that, by learning to let go of some pride, are more valuable to me than that doctor of ministry degree or that master's degree or that other degree that I've earned. Because the school of hard knocks means much more than anything else. But see, the same, you're just like me and I'm just like you. I just happen to be a preacher. We're all in it together. I want you to learn to change and become the person God made you for. And that's not going to happen if you keep taking the reins back from God and saying, I got it. I'll do it. You're not going to learn anything when you do that. You got to say, God, here are the reins. You take over. And you tell me what to do. And then you got to be willing to wait. If it takes 5 years or 10 years or 14 years, it doesn't matter. You got to wait. Because some lessons we just don't learn quickly. Let's pray together.